Hello and welcome to Cole Red Plays Raid Shadow Legends. I am Cole Red. Thank you for joining me. The fusion event for the Incarnate has launched, and it is a hybrid fusion event. Now, I want to discuss hybrid fusion events briefly at the top of this video because I think there's some value to be had here for everybody, whether you're going for the fusion or not, whether you're a free-to-play player, or low spender, or a whale. There's some interesting changes that have happened to the game in the past few months, which I think require us to re-examine hybrid fusion events a little bit, just to make sure we're not missing out. And then, of course, as always, I am going to be diving deeply into the calendar event for this fusion in order to help you create your no-fail fusion plan so that those of you who have decided to go for the legendary champion have the best chance of success. I hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. Just a quick reminder to please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and consider joining our Discord community. Also, don't forget about our Takeover Tuesday live streams that happen every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, where I give away free account takeovers to members of my Discord community. So join the Discord community, come check out a live stream. We have a lot of fun. I hope to see you there. I want to start by talking about something that's been added to the game fairly recently that has changed the way I am viewing any fragment event now, whether it's a classic fragment event or a hybrid fragment event. And that is the new mechanic with High Mother Mod. Now, High Mother Mod can only be collected by using fragments from past fusions. Now, I ran out of old fragments, right? I have burned through all of the failed fusion fragments that I had left in my portal here. And so now I have to actively collect fragments. And what that means is, for any event that I decide not to go for the champion, I still want to collect as many fragments as possible. Now, you can come up here to look at the little information guide on how to do this. But if you scroll down, it tells you right here how to exchange champion fragments. Basically, 5 epic champion fragments equals 1 exchange point, and 5 exchange points equals 1 fragment exchange chest. So you need 25 epic fragments or 5 legendary fragments in order to get a pull for High Mother Mod. The rewards here are right here. You can see you can get fragments, 1 to 3 fragments from a chest. I don't remember what the exact drop rates are, but this is the only way to get High Mother Mod, and she is definitely a good legendary champion. Some people may be very excited to get her. So if you are pursuing High Mother Mod, you want fragments, and you want fragments from champions that you don't fuse for other reasons. As you can see here with Estrid, I still have Astrid. I'm not going to use her as, I'm not going to exchange her fragments. I'm going to get this champion. I think she's an awesome champion. I'm just waiting for the right time to summon her, probably during this champion chase. But you can see I have 5 extra fragments there. So those 5 extra fragments will go towards a pull for High Mother Mod. And that means that all fragments from all fragment events are now valuable. So you want to consider that, even if you have decided to not go for the Incarnate. Even if you just want, say, 1 copy of Slickis Stripe Hide as a consolation prize, you still want to pick up any easy fragments you can, because those can turn into pulls for High Mother Mod. So just consider that when creating your fusion plan. And like I said, any fragments that you can get, even if you're not going to use them, maybe especially, I guess, if you're not going to use them to turn them into a champion, you can turn them into High Mother Mod pulls, whatever exchange, fragment exchange chest pulls. It's a complicated name for that, but that's what you can do. So consider that as you look at the calendar for this event. Now, I do want to briefly review both of these champions. So we're going to start with the Incarnate. If you look at her stats, she is nice and tanky, 19k HP, almost 1500 defense, good speed, a little bit of resist and accuracy in her stats. Her A1 has a double chance of provoking. It's pretty good. We're going to ignore her Arbiter Duo-ness for the time being, just because I want to judge her without that, so you can see whether or not she's a good champion, because some of you won't have your Arbiter. Now, her A2 has a 100% chance of removing all shield buffs from the enemies, plus 1 other buff. So it's a partial buff removal. This is also an AoE hit. And then finally, it places a shield buff on your team for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. And the shield is proportional to this champion's defense, so it should be a nice hefty shield. She should be relatively tanky in and of herself, which is important because her A3 is an ally protection. Now, ally protectors take the damage from the rest of the team. They absorb a portion of the damage from the rest of the team. So they become potentially easy to kill, right? They die more easily because they're taking more damage than they would otherwise. That's where this strengthen buff comes in. That's probably the best buff in the game to pair with ally protection. It's a 25% damage mitigation right off the top. You can still add an increased defense here. You can still add those shields on top of that ally protect. You're getting a lot of survivability out of these two skills. And I would say that if you don't have a Vault Keeper Wixwell Infinity team and you don't have an unkillable clan boss team, an ally protector is the classic way to build a killable clan boss composition. And this is a very good ally protector. Excellent ally protector with strengthen and with shields as well. And remember that this shield skill against the clan boss would also remove the increased attack buff that the affinity clan bosses get. So a very good traditional killable clan boss champion. I know a lot of players aren't doing that right now because of Wixwell, but if you skip the Wixwell or you don't have Wixwell and you're still looking for an Ultra Nightmare solution, the Incarnate could potentially be a key component to getting you your 2-key Ultra Nightmare team. Now we have two passives. The first one increases this champion's accuracy for each ally under ally protection. That's nice. Gives you a better chance of provoking. That's going to be usable in Hydra. And the second one increases this champion's resistance by 20 for each ally under ally protection buff. That can help in a lot of boss fights. Now, the rest of this is about the Arbiter. I do think that pairing the Incarnate with the Arbiter is going to give additional survivability to your team, because this passive makes Arbiter very hard to kill. And then this passive says that when the Incarnate is killed, that resets the Arbiter's revive. So if that ally protection actually kills the Incarnate, you're going to get an instant revive from your Arbiter on the next turn. I think this could be a good pairing in Doom Tower. It could be a good pairing, potentially, maybe in Arena. I'm not sure about that yet. And also in Hydra. I think that's the best place where it's going to be used. You could even pair those two champions with Wixwell. And then you're going to have two A1 provoke champions. You're going to have shields, decrease attack, increase defense, strengthen. You're going to get a very, very tanky team out of that. You still have to go find your hex, your slow, and your damage. So there could make the composition a little bit tricky. But I think for the lower levels of Hydra, that could be a really nice trio to consider. Now we're going to take a look at Slickis here. This is a new damage dealer, another void damage dealer, attack-based. Pretty good attack numbers for an epic. 1454, not outstanding. On the squishy side with under 900 defense and 14.5k HP. Okay speed. If we look at the A1, it is a double hitter with 2 chances to stun. That's not too bad for an epic. The A2 is also a double hitter, which will ignore shield, increase defense, and strengthen. And this does have some sustain in it, although I don't know that that will play very often. The A3 is an AoE that before attacking places increased crit rate buff and increased crit damage buff. That's really nice. That means you can build this champion with 70% crit rate, and the champion should hit very hard. We have a passive here that increases this champion's crit damage by 10% every time they kill an enemy, and these stacks don't reset upon death. So this would be useful, I think, primarily probably in faction crypts or wave content, maybe in some dungeons if you're using this champion as a wave clearer. And then if this champion's blade of finality skill kills an enemy, the next skill they use will ignore 30% of the target's defense. But the A2 kills somebody, the next skill will ignore 30% of defense, so you could potentially set up the A3 with the A2. There's no extra turn mechanic here, though. So it's not as useful as some of the other damage dealers that we've seen there. I do think this could potentially be a budget gold 5 arena nuker. With that increased defense, you're going to get more damage out of them. And that A2 does ignore shield, increased defense, and strengthen, which is not bad to have in arena. But this would be more of a single target kind of assassination skill. So, you know, depending on the team composition, you might get some value out of it. So if you don't have Genbo or Skull Crown or Magnar, I don't think Slickis is going to be as good, but if the multipliers are good, he could do a lot of damage and could be worth building as sort of a budget arena nuker. I know Void epics aren't typically considered budget, but I think any epic is budget, right? So you don't have to waste legendary tomes. And you can build this champion relatively quickly. And again, you're getting it for free here through the Fusion event. So if you don't have that Gold 5 Arena Nuker solution yet, and you're not going for the Incarnate, this could be a really nice consolation prize for those of you who still need it. Okay, so now let's take a look at the Fusion event calendar. As you can see, we need 4 copies of Slickis here. Each copy takes 100 fragments, so we need 400 fragments. So as you can see, there are 450 fragments available because there are 50 from this summon rush in the middle of the calendar. Now, they call this the extra fragments. They're not actually extra fragments. They're just part of the 450. We need 400 out of the 450. That means we can't get a free extra copy of Slickis. It's not available to us to get a full extra copy. But there is a summon rush going on starting tomorrow. Now, this should happen during a 2x Void Shard event. We can't be 100% certain that's what's going to happen because Plarium likes to mess with the 2x events, but it is scheduled to be a 2x Void event. Now, if that happens, that's going to be very friendly. That's really good for us if we get the 2x Void Shard event because Slickis is a Void champion. So if we're pulling the 2x Voids and we're trying to get, our points there, remember that you're going to need 3,000 points for your 25 fragments. Now, that is typically equal to 6 Sacreds or 25 Voids. Right? Sacreds are worth 500 points each. I believe Voids are worth 120 points each. So 25 Voids would get you the 3,000 points. So if you already have 25 Voids and it is a 2x Void event, we're going to be great. We're going to do that all for the Summon Rush. Now that means some of us are going to pull extra copies of Slickis Stripe Hide. Now there are a couple of things to consider if you do pull an extra copy. The first is that each copy is worth 4 events. So you could just say, I'm going to cross off 4 events. I'm not going to do the 3 artifact enhancements because I don't want to spend silver. That's going to allow me to save a lot of silver. And then maybe I can also skip one of these, dungeon diver. There are 3 dungeon divers events. So one of those might come out or one of the champion trainings might come out or something like that. Typically, all of the tournaments are relatively easy. So you're going to do all of the tournaments. If you're going to skip something, you're going to skip one of the events because the events are significantly harder. The other thing that you could skip if you're going to skip a tournament is you could skip the champion chase tournament here. That's the one tournament that is worth skipping. So for instance, you could skip the 3 artifact enhancements and the champion chase. Now, my recommendation is you don't do that right away. If you have the silver, if you've budgeted your silver properly and you can do the first artifact enhancement event, go ahead and do it. Because then even, if you end up skipping events later on, you build yourself a little bit of leeway. Like, if you mess up somewhere and you don't complete the dragon tournament or you mess up on the dungeon divers event or something, you have those extra fragments as a cushion. However, if you want to have a copy of Slickis, then you can't skip 4 events. The most you could skip would be 2, and then you'd still have to do the summon rush here, right? If you want an extra copy, the other way to do it is just to do literally every event with the exception of the bonus summon rush. So the math doesn't necessarily get super easy when you get an extra copy. It just gives you some flexibility, and then you have to figure out how to use that flexibility to the best effect for your life, right? For the time in game and the things that are going on in your life. Now, a couple of things to consider is if you are not using void shards here and you're using sacreds, there's an additional consideration. I looked at the last time we had this format, and this was during the Emic Trunk Heart event. So as you can see, again, we had a bonus summon rush here for Emic Trunk Heart. This was last August. We have that 50 extra fragments, again, a hybrid fusion event. So the thing is, I looked at, this is great. I'm on HH's site, so hellhades.com. You can come here and look at any past fusion event. And I often do as research for current fusion events. So this summon rush is happening exactly the same way. There's a summon rush early. You can see there's a summon rush on day 2. The second summon rush starts on day 6, and then the champion chase starts on day 9. And that's exactly the way it's happening for the Incarnate Fusion event. So if we look at day 2, you can see it takes 3,000 points to get 25 fragments. In this case, it was Firegun Isbell, but for our current event, it's Slickis. So 3,000 points means 6 sacred shards, right? You can see 500 points per sacred shard, 120 points per void shard. So if you are pulling sacreds, this is going to take you 6 sacreds. Now, if you go to day 6 here, you can see for the second summon rush, again, it's 3,000 points for the first 25 shards. So it's exactly the same for the first 25 shards. The second batch of shards is 2,500 more points. So what that means is if we look back at our calendar, this one would be 6 sacreds. This summon rush would be 6 sacreds. And then the next batch would be 5 sacreds. So if you're not using void shards here, or you don't have enough void shards, you could pull whatever shards you want. You can, I use sacreds. I use sacreds because I think that it's the most efficient way to do it. But what I would say is if you're going to go for an additional 25 shards, you might want to consider skipping this summon rush altogether and going directly here. And what I mean by that is, imagine you did the first summon rush for the first 25 shards, right? And then you did the second summon rush for another 25 shards. That would cost you 12 sacreds. But if you skip the first summon rush and just come here to the second summon rush and spend 11 sacreds, you get 50 shards. So you can save yourself a sacred shard. Plus, this reward track, you're going to get further along. So you're going to get better rewards in this bonus summon rush. So if you're considering like going for additional fragments, I would say you could potentially skip this first summon rush if you don't have enough void shards. But again, you're going to need at least 11 sacred shards. And that's not factoring in the champion chase over here. But this is one more option here. Again, there are a lot of options here. We could skip the summon rush and the champion chase and go for this summon rush instead. So spend no shards during the first summon rush, spend no shards during the champion chase, and go all in on the bonus summon rush because it's a little bit more efficient and you'll get a little bit further into your reward track. So that is an option if you just want the exact number of shards. But again, I think the best option for most people is going to be pull void shards for the summon rush. And then you can consider whether or not you want to do the second summon rush or the champion chase. There isn't going to be a bonus during this champion chase. I expect to see progressive events during both the second summon rush and the champion chase, but there isn't going to be a 2x event, or I don't expect a 2x event. That should happen during the first summon rush. Okay, so now that we've handled the shard events, now we can start talking about all of the other events. Currently, it is Thursday. We have the Fire Night tournament going on. The Dungeon Divers event is starting in a few hours. It's not actually live yet, so you want to hold off until the Dungeon Divers event starts and then drop your Fire Night energy. Remember that these tournaments typically take around 2K energy. It doesn't really matter what level what stage you're clearing. Most stages have fairly similar efficiencies. You can always find a better efficiency. You can look on the drop rate charts. We have them all over the place. Maybe I'll put a link to them in the description of this video. But there are like 4 or 5 different stages you can farm. I think stage 3 is really efficient, and stage 11 or something like that. So there are a bunch of different stages you can farm. And it always takes about the same amount of energy. It's just that it takes more time. So if you're using multi-battles, it's going to take more multi-battles as well. So again, stage 20 tends to be the best to use here, but you need 2K for your Fire Night tournament, and you do want to drop all of that into your Dungeon Divers. I would probably also drop all of my Ice Golem energy during the first day into this Dungeon Divers as well. That's going to be another 2K, and that means you get this 4K for free because Dungeon Divers takes about 5,000 energy. So that 5,000 is going to just absorb this 4,000 here, and you don't have to spend that extra. So be efficient, dump all of that in there. Now that means that this Dungeon Divers event isn't going to have that Ice Golem energy unless you want to keep spending on Ice Golem. You can. You could do some champion training during that. It's all up to you. Champion training can also fit into this first event. So you could potentially do Fire Knight, Ice Golem, and Champion Training all within the Dungeon Divers. If you need to keep doing Champion Training, you can do some of that in the Dungeon Divers too. This event looks like the best one to skip. Like this Dungeon Divers event here. So if you happen to pull an extra Slickis, or if you have decided to get some extra fragments out of the Summon Rush, I would probably skip this second Dungeon Diver. Right? If I pull a copy of Slickis Stripe Hide, I will probably do this first artifact enhancement and skip the second and third, and I'll skip this Dungeon Divers event, and that would give me 25 extra fragments to then put towards High Mother Maud, and I'd feel really comfortable with that because I'd save a ton of silver, and this Dungeon Divers is really inefficient. That would then allow me to put this Dragon Tournament energy to wait on the Dragon Tournament, don't do it right away, and drop that into this Dungeon Divers event 3. Same thing with the Spider Tournament, right? Put all of that 2k energy into this Dungeon Divers event. And then again, you have the Champion Training event to make up any difference. So if you're doing Champion Training in this particular fusion event, you're going to want to do a lot of it in the campaign because it overlaps with your Dungeon Divers event really nicely in both places. And then you can, once you're outside of that Dungeon Divers event, you can go ahead and use your brews to finish it off. Now, one thing to consider during this Champion Chase tournament, if you're going to do this Champion Chase tournament right here, you want to save all of your fragments for that Champion Chase tournament, right? So if you think about collecting all the fragments, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 1 copy. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 2 copies. And then potentially if you're going for the Summon Rush, that could be 2, 3, 4. That's 3 copies. And then you could actually, you could get 3 copies of the Epic during the Champion Chase tournament. Even if you're not going for the Summon Rush, before this Champion Chase tournament ends, you can complete, say, the Dungeon Divers, maybe the Champion Training, whatever you want to do. So this is where you fuse your Epics. And that means those Epics have to be taken up to level 50 and fully ascended before they're fused into your Incarnate. So they would also go into your Champion Training event. This calendar is getting very marked up, but you can see we're trying to be as efficient as possible. So that last copy of Slickis, you're going to have to use, you're not going to have during the Champion Chase tournament. So, are you going to skip the Champion Chase? I don't know. A fusion, any classic fusion, any fusion event where you have champions that you're getting mid-event, you will always want to pull them during the Champion Chase tournament. Even if you don't get these 25 additional fragments, you'll get additional rewards by waiting until that point. And there's no real advantage to doing them ahead of this Champion Training event anyway. So you may as well hold them to that point. Okay, so if I'm going to try to total up what I need for this particular fusion event, I'm going to go with the 25 voids here for this Summon Rush. I'm going to hold off on this Summon Rush until I see it, and if there is a good progressive or an additional event that is going on, I will maybe consider pulling Sacred Shards during that Summon Rush. Probably not, though. This is the one I'm probably going to skip. I'm going to plan on the full 16. I'm going to fuse the 3 Epics during this Champion Chase. I'm also going to pull my Astrid during that Champion Chase. So remember that Void Epics are 350 points each. That's going to be 1,050, and then another 500 from my Astrid. So that's going to give me 1,550 points on the Champion Chase. You also get points for like all of those champions you pull during campaign runs in the Champion Training. Like if I'm doing campaign runs, all of those, uncommons and rares that drop are going to give me Champion Chase tournament points. Also, I probably have some Doom Tower champions I could fuse. So I should be able to do this with almost no shards. But if I do have to pull shards, I'll maybe pull some Sacreds again if there's a good progressive, or I'll pull some Ancients. So let's call this, I don't know, let's call this 3 Sacreds. I might be able to do it for less than that. And then as far as energy is concerned, we've got the 5k here. We've got the 5k here for Dungeon Divers 2. And then the question is, can we skip the Dungeon Divers like this one here? I'm going to plan as if I can't. So that's going to be another 5k. And then I think the champion training events are going to extend that probably somewhere in the vicinity of 2K per champion training event. So I think I'm looking at something around 19K energy. As far as silver is concerned, the artifact enhancements take 20 million silver each. So we're looking at 60 million silver. And then as far as shards is concerned, we're looking at the 25 voids and the 3 sacreds. And that should be enough for this fusion. Remember, you don't need all of that right now. You are going to get some of that silver as you go. You're going to sell. So I already have like 50 million silver, but I think if you have, say, 15 million silver, you're probably fine. You could even do it with less if you have a lot of forge materials or you haven't done a good gear cleanse in a while. If you don't have the void shards here, you're going to have to do some other shard type. And again, if they turn out to not give us the 2 times void this weekend, because Plarium likes messing with us, that may change the plan. So consider that moving forward. And again, you may be able to save a lot of these resources if it is a void event and you happen to pull an extra copy of Slickis. All right, so that is the event. Let me know if you have any tips or insight into how to improve this no-fail fusion plan. And do you like these videos? I find them useful. I find it useful to me to plan it, but I always like to hear from you as well. So let me know that in the comments below as well. All right, that is it for me today. Thank you so much for hanging out. I have been Colred, and I will see you in another video soon.